Good evening. My name is Sue Smerrick. I'm a member of the League of Women Voters of the Ann Arbor area. I welcome you to tonight's forum featuring candidates from the 52nd and 55th districts of the Michigan House of Representatives. The candidates tonight will be on the ballot in the primary election on Tuesday, August 4th. This year, the League of Women Voters is celebrating 100 years of expanding voter rights, educating voters, and shaping and influencing legislation at the local, state, and national levels. We are pleased to sponsor these forums. The League is a nonpartisan civic organization that encourages informed and active participation by all citizens in government. The League works to increase understanding of major public policy issues and seeks to strengthen and broaden knowledge about our form of government and democracy. While the League does not support candidates or parties, we do take stands on issues we have studied. One of the League's most important goals is to assist voters in making informed choices at the polls, and thus we bring you tonight's forum. Our moderator tonight is Jeff Smerrick, who will explain the format and get us started. Jeff?
Thank you, Sue, and thank you everyone for joining us this evening. You're good citizens. Tonight we have a combined candidates forum for two candidates running for the Michigan 52nd District of the Michigan House of Representatives, Greg Marquis and Melanie Wiedemeyer. Candidate Melanie Wiedemeyer was invited to attend this evening, but found she was unable to attend. And also we have with us Felicia Brabac and Stephen Courant. They will be running in the Michigan 55th District for the Michigan House of Representatives. Thank you, candidates, for participating in this forum. The forum tonight will have this format. Each candidate will have an opening statement of up to 1 minute. Each candidate will have a closing statement of up to 90 seconds. In between, I will ask questions which came from the Ann Arbor community. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to respond to a question, 2 minutes. And at appropriate times, a sign on the screen will indicate the time remaining, 30 seconds, and then stop. Candidates, if you have used up your time, you will be allowed to finish your sentence, and then your microphone will be muted so that the other candidates will have an equal opportunity to participate. The candidates will begin speaking in alphabetical order. Depending on the number of questions, all candidates will have an opportunity to be the first or last to answer the question. We're ready now for your opening statement, Ms. Felicia Brabac.
Thank you to the League of Women Voters for having us here this evening. My name is Felicia Brabac, and I am running to be the next state representative in Michigan's 55th district and have a goal of making Southeast Michigan and Washtenaw County a place that everyone can be proud to call home. I'm currently a Washtenaw County Commissioner, and I'm actually the longest serving member of that board, having begun my tenure in 2011. I'm also a clinical psychologist with a background in social work, and if elected would be the only mental health care practitioner out of 110 state representatives. I'm hoping to bring that balance of local government experience and mental health care expertise to policymaking in Lansing. I'm also an invested and deeply involved member in the community. My husband Dave and I decided to raise our kids here, send them to our amazing public schools. We've even coached their sports teams. And I also have the privilege of serving on the board of directors of 2 of our amazing local nonprofits, Food Gatherers and Garrett Space. Being able to serve others is what motivates me. And if I can make our district that much better, that's what I hope to do as your next state representative.
Thank you, Ms. Brabac. And now, Stephen Courant, may we have your opening statement?
Hello. I'd like to also start by thanking the League for putting on this forum. I think it's just amazing, and it's really helped people in previous years. My name is Stephen Kurant. I'm a graduate of the University of Michigan Dearborn, and I live and work in the 55th District as a data analyst. I'm running for office because I believe we need politicians in office who put people first and trust in facts and data to guide the decisions being made every day.
Thank
I
you.
also, oh,
I beg your pardon, Mr. Courant.
nope, I got a little bit more here. We need politicians who answer the people who elected them, and I believe that I can be one of those politicians. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Courant. I do apologize for interrupting you. And now we're ready for your opening statement, Mr. Marquis.
That's better. Hi, good evening, and thank you to the League of Women Voters for having me here again tonight. As I mentioned yesterday, I'm not a career politician. I work at the University of Michigan as a hazardous materials specialist, protecting the environment by coordinating the proper management and disposal of the chemical waste streams of one of the most diverse and largest hazardous waste generators in the state. I also respond to hazmat spills on campus. I live in Lima Township with my daughter, Anna, and my wife, Christine. And I decided to run because, quite frankly, people at both ends of the political spectrum have been asking me to run. They both see that I have a lot to offer. I also have a background in law enforcement, and that is particularly under the microscope at this time. I look forward to working together with our community to succeed in these difficult times.
Thank you, Mr. Marquis. And now we're ready for our questions. As a reminder, I will be reading each question once, and it will not be repeated unless I'm requested to repeat it. To begin tonight, we will start with Mr. Courant of the 55th District. Mr. Courant, the first question goes to you. What will you bring to the Michigan Legislature to overcome the extreme partisanship which has gripped Michigan government? How will you work with members of both parties for the benefit of Michiganders?
Yeah, I think that's a great question with politics being so polarized nowadays. But it's my firm belief that someone might not agree on every issue with me, but I do believe that they will agree with some issues with me. And I think with that in mind, you can sort of reach across the aisle and you can talk through what you do agree on. And you can get things done based on that instead of what you don't agree on. You're never going to agree with anyone or with everyone on everything, but you will agree with them on some things. And I do believe that I can be that person who reaches across the aisle and who brings people together and helps make a difference for the people in the district.
Thank you, Mr. Courant. And now Mr. Marquis of the 52nd District, the same question to you, sir.
The biggest problem we have today, I think, is that we have seen people retreat into their partisan corners and refuse to work with each other. This kind of partisan bickering doesn't solve any of our problems. We have to be willing to see both sides of an issue. You can't just say, I only see this issue as a Republican or as a conservative Tea Party Republican, or I only see this issue as a far left liberal. You have to be able to see both sides of an issue and find out where the middle meets. We have a lot to learn from each other. We have to be able to reach out to each other, work together, and say, look, we may not agree on all aspects of solving this problem, but let's find the areas of the solution that we can agree on and build from that.
Thank you, Mr. Marquis. And now Ms. Brabac of the 55th District, same question to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much. So I've dedicated my life as a psychologist and as someone who has a social work degree to building relationships and serving other people. It's what I've chosen to do as my profession. It's a value that I hold close, and I think one that is really missing, and we see that in the partisanship now on all levels of government. As a county commissioner, I've had the opportunity to work with Republican colleagues and even made it such a value or such an important part of the work that I got to do that I would drive to Livonia to meet with one of my Republican colleagues every month so that he and I could really talk through issues and figure out what we could work together. So I think not only saying that you want to do it, but actually doing it is really, really important. And I feel like partisanship has led to some of really, really important legislation getting stuck in committees. And if we have the opportunity to really look at, I often use the image of a Venn diagram, and we look at that space where we have that shared interest and can work together, we really need to focus on that. One of the issues that I hope to work on as the next state representative in the 55th is mental health care. And that is an issue that affects so many of us, so many families. And I think that that is an issue where we can cross party lines, work together to improve access and not make it a partisan issue. We need to help break through the stalemate of partisanship. And I think really focusing on what we can do together helps, and really having that value and follow through then of relationship building and having that be paramount will really help with that.
Thank you, Ms. Brabac. And now the next question you start with. Since January of 2020, about 118,000 Americans and about 6,000 Michiganders have died from the COVID-19 virus, especially in congregate settings, including senior facilities, prisons, and large workplaces. Adequate testing and contact tracing for the COVID virus have not yet been achieved. What healthcare and public health strategies are necessary to protect the health of Michiganders in all settings, especially if there's another wave of COVID cases in Michigan?
That's a great question. Thanks, Jeff. So I believe that access to healthcare is a right, that we should all have access to that folks, our residents, shouldn't have to worry about choosing between getting healthcare and potentially financial ruin. That should not be a decision that people have to make. I believe that we should have a single payer healthcare system, and I feel like this pandemic has just pointed out how important that is and why we need that. I also feel like the other thing that this pandemic has highlighted, something that we already know, but we've seen even more, is the inequities in our Black and Brown communities. Even before COVID, one of the inequities that we knew that existed here in our county was that if you are a Black man living in our county, you live 10 years less than your white counterpart. If you are in the Latinx community, it's 16 years, and that was pre-COVID. So we know that these inequities exist, and we need to do something about them. One of the things that I did at the county level was spearhead our county's first ever racial equity policy, and trying to look at these inequities and do something about. And so to do that, we need to invest in our public health care systems. We need to make sure that we put our residents before corporations and profits, which often is happening. And we also need to protect our workers. We need to work with our union partners to make sure that our frontline workers, whether that's nurses, doctors, grocery store workers, delivery workers, our food supply workers, make sure that they have PPE that they need. We also need to make sure that there are protections in place so that if people need to take time because there's a pandemic, that they don't get fired from their job. You know, the bottom line to me in all of this is that we need to put people first and get people the care that they need above profits.
Thank you, Ms. Brabac. And now Mr. Courant from the 55th District, same question to you, sir.
Yeah, I would totally agree with the answer on going towards a single payer healthcare system. I believe that would ensure access equally and fairly to everyone in the district. I think we do need to look short term as well. The data has shown that if we ease off of the restrictions too quickly, we'll end up in a second wave situation. So I think we need to both prepare for that and prepare for the future for something like this to happen. So having adequate PPE supplies in our stockpiles, as well as having a board of commissioners that looks at what sort of businesses can move forward during a pandemic. Unfortunately, I think we were given such a short time period, and we did as well as we could with the information we had. And a lot of people were not happy with that, but it was something that needed to be done. And I think in the future, we can improve upon that. You saw businesses innovate so quickly, getting to some sort of contactless delivery. You know, I used to go to drive-in movies when I was younger, and out at my cottage, and it's amazing to hear how all of them wanted to get back into business. And I think that's definitely an option in the future. And I think we need to prepare and have a list of businesses that can stay open, how they can transition to contactless entertainment and things of that nature, just to keep everyone's lives as normal as possible, while also protecting people. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Courant. And now Mr. Marquis of the 52nd District, the same question to you, sir.
So I have to kind of review what specifically the question was, but
I'd be happy to repeat it. Essentially, we've had 118,000 Americans and about 6,000 Michiganders die of COVID. What strategies for public health and healthcare are necessary to protect the health of Michiganders?
okay. It's been a while since I heard the question. I wanted to make sure I was clear. Moving forward, I think we need to look at this as a lesson. It's certainly not going to be the last pandemic that we're going to face. Maybe it is in our lifetime. I hope so. But we can learn from this. I know a lot of institutions thought they were properly prepared for a pandemic. As it turns out, we were woefully short on many supplies. PPE fell short. Healthcare fell short. We need to make sure that we move more quickly to protect people in public transit situations. I know that even here in Washtenaw County at the university, many transit operators got sick because they weren't being properly protected. So we need to be more proactive in our approach to pandemics. We need to make sure that everyone is adequately protected and adequately cared for. I think that it's worth investigating as to why African Americans seem to be more susceptible to not only contracting the coronavirus, but dying from it. There's no excuse for the disproportionate number of African Americans getting sick from and dying from this virus in our society. I hope that we've learned from this. I hope that we learn to prepare better in the future, because the next pandemic could conceivably be much more vicious and lethal than the coronavirus.
Thank you, Mr. Marquis. And the next question starts with you also.
Yeah.
More than 32 million Americans have lost their jobs in just the first 3 months of this year. And as of April, Michigan had a 22.7% unemployment rate. All this economic wreckage will cause Michigan to have a projected $3.2 billion budget deficit. How should Michigan support its citizens, especially the unemployed, given this projected $3.2 billion state budget deficit?
I think that is the $3.2 billion question. And the first thing, fortunately, we are seeing some of that turnaround at this time. People are going back to work. But we still need to reach out to those who are either unemployed still or who have permanently lost their jobs. We need to foster an environment of economic growth. One of the things I look at is regulations. It's part of the way I do my work. I look at the plethora of regulations, and we need to look at our state regulations and try to review them such that they make sense, that they're not contradictory, and that they don't so stifle a business that they choose to locate elsewhere. I think the same has to be said for our tax structure. If we have a tax structure that is so burdensome on small, medium, and large businesses that they can't afford to locate in our state, they won't. They'll go either out of state to states that have a lower tax burden, or they'll simply go overseas. So we need to make sure that we create an environment that fosters a quick return to economic growth.
Thank you, Mr. Marquis. And now Ms. Brabac of the 55th District, same question to you, ma'am.
Thanks so much. I appreciate it, Jeff. So I think there are two major issues that we need to take a look at.
Ms. Brabac, I think you're muted, so we need to unmute you.
Oops, I just got muted by the host. Okay, unmuted now. So two major issues that we need to look at. The first is the unemployment system itself. So one of the things that we know is that the unemployment system that was it was changed and reformed during our our previous governor has unfortunately had the impact of making it more difficult for folks to access, to be approved, and to receive their unemployment. And so we have just an issue number one with that. I know that our current state reps have been working hard to help people access their unemployment, but people shouldn't have to directly know a state rep to be able to access their unemployment. They should be able to just go on, like just do what needs to be done to be able to access that. But I am grateful for folks who are able to help our residents navigate that. The second thing that I think that we need to be aware of is right now the corporate loopholes that we have. Particularly, we have a mega tax credit, and what I worry about is how our small businesses are impacted. Right now in Washington County, we know that because of the pandemic, 1 in 7 small businesses are at risk of not reopening. And so we need to do what we can to support our small businesses and that local economic hub that they are for all of us. The other thing that I worry about and kind of thinking into the future is that although that's the unemployment rate now, when we look at what our unemployment rate was prior to COVID, we were at 3.6%. It's projected to be 10% by the end of next year. And while that's better than current, it certainly isn't where we were. And so we need to be able to fix our unemployment system, put more resources into our small business to ensure the success of our residents here locally.
Thank you, Ms. Brabac. And now Mr. Courant of the 55th District, same question to you, sir.
Thanks. Yeah, I would also agree again with Felicia. I think we definitely need to revamp the unemployment system. We also need to make sure that in times like this, people who are already struggling and need that money aren't standing in a line or needing to go into an office to get that help. And I think that has a lot to do with how the system's set up. It's definitely set up to make you, quote unquote, work to go get that money. What someone should be able to do is figure out how to either get back to work, get a new job. They could be online training for a new tech career, but instead they're waiting in line for a number. And I think that's something that really is going to hurt us in the long run. As far as getting that money back, we definitely need to hold corporations, especially large corporations, responsible for any tax breaks that they may have taken or want to take in the future. I don't believe that we're ever going to get all of those back with the legislator as it is, but I do believe that we can hold them responsible and take back money that might have been put to misuse in a way that they didn't tell us they were going to use it for, and we can actually give that money to small businesses instead. Micro grants and things of that nature have shown to be very helpful, and I believe we can implement that on a wider scale. In the short term, I think we're going to have to definitely choose what is important, and hopefully the legislator will choose things like education and public health care ahead of future tax breaks.
Thank you, Mr. Courant, and you start the next question as well. On April 14, protesters carrying Nazi swastikas, Confederate flags, and automatic assault rifles stormed into the state capitol in Lansing. They were protesting Governor Whitmer's executive orders trying to stop the spread of the deadly COVID virus. And the protesters even tried to force themselves onto the floor of the legislature itself. Could you comment on the nature of these protests and what, if anything, should the legislature do to prevent armed trespassers from seizing control of the Michigan legislature?
Yeah, I mean, this is a complicated issue because I think you have to take into account free speech and that we do have that in this country. But I don't believe that hate speech has any place on the Capitol building lawn or elsewhere for that matter. As far as weaponry and things of that nature being in the legislature, I mean, there's other states that prohibit having weapons at demonstrations if they're used as a means to intimidate. if you're protesting gun rights and you have unloaded, checked weaponry before you get there, and the state police are there checking that it's unloaded and keeping everyone safe, then I think that's admissible. But I don't think it's admissible for people to use it to threaten someone or something of that nature, and that might not have been anyone's prerogative there, and I sure hope it wasn't. But something like that shouldn't be allowed. I think we definitely need to tread that line, but like I said, when it comes to threatening speech or hate speech, that's not something that we can have in the state of Michigan. We're just too diverse of a state to have that.
Thank you, Mr. Courant. And now the same question to you, Mr. Marquis of the 52nd District.
I wasn't at the protests. All I know of the protests is what I've seen either on the news or in Facebook clips. The only images I saw of swastikas is where the protesters portrayed Governor Whitmer as wearing a swastika on her armbands. None of the footage I saw showed a Confederate flag. That doesn't mean they weren't there. And my understanding of those who came there armed was that they were there to reinforce their Second Amendment rights. Under current Michigan law, they do have a right to bring firearms, open carry firearms into the state capitol. I don't necessarily think that that's appropriate, or that the way that all came out was the most appropriate way to handle their expression of their rights. I know a lot of people felt intimidated and felt that it was an armed assault on the Capitol, but certainly we need to protect people's First and Second Amendment rights. We cannot tolerate racism in our society, however. I have to concur with Stephen on that. Racism has no place in our society. It has no place in our community. And we need to better educate folks to show them why that is not an acceptable path of behavior or belief.
Thank you, Mr. Beg your pardon, please continue.
I'm good.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Marquis. And now same question to you, Ms. Brabac of the 55th District.
Thanks, Jeff. So I believe that white supremacy has no place in our society, let alone our civic discourse. I do believe that people have a right to voice their opinion, but again, white supremacy has no place in public discourse and public dialogue. I do believe that and know that the Capitol Commission has the opportunity and the ability to change the law so that guns are not allowed in the Capitol, and right now that is not happening. For me, as a Black woman, I found the conflation of the two, wanting to express frustration and anger at the governor, but also white supremacist different symbols. I found that to be very troubling and frightening. As a commissioner, there was a meeting that we had where a number of folks from outside of our county actually came and were open carrying, and I felt like it was used as a method to intimidate us to vote a certain way. And I just feel like that has no place in our public dialogue and our policy making. But what I do think that this leads to is a bigger conversation about gun safety in our country and the need to really address that. And so I think that we need to have universal background checks. We need to make sure that we support red flag laws. We also need to work with our federal partners to close both the boyfriend loophole and the gun show loophole. And we need to just make sure that we have smart, responsible gun ownership. And that's where we need to really focus our energy. But specifically to the issue that you asked about, Jeff, again, I just want to reiterate that white supremacy has no place in our civic discourse, let alone in our society.
Thank you, Ms. Brabac, and you get the first of the next question. Michigan has experienced actual and threatened environmental contamination and destruction in recent years. For example, the Gelman dioxane plume in Ann Arbor, the contamination of the Kalamazoo River, the Flint water crisis, the PFAS contamination in our drinking water, the collapse of the 2 private dams in Midland most recently, and the Line 5 controversy that threatens Great Lakes waters. What are your priorities and strategies for protecting Michigan's waters and environment?
Great question. Thank you, Jeff. So there are specific things that I would like to look at and have had the opportunity to talk to some of our environmental experts in the area to really have, as much as I can, thorough conversations, and hopefully they will continue about these issues. So in terms of line 5, you asked about specifically. So line 5, I believe, should be decommissioned. And Bryn-Josette, and then you also talked about the spill in Kalamazoo. And I worry about that happening under the Straits of Mackinac, which we know is such an environmentally rich area. We need to be able to work to get the resources to folks in the UP and Canada, but we need to find a different way to do that. We know that the Great Lakes have 20% of our fresh surface water, so we need to work to protect that. And so I think decommissioning line 5 is a way to do that. We also need to work with our union partners who are having and working with our workers to have good jobs, stable jobs at good pay, but we need to find a different way to have those jobs be present and not working on that line or in the tunnel. We also need to, I believe, support a polluter pay legislation, which would have then addressed the 1,4-dioxane issue. Right now, the company who purchased that Danaher has the technology to clean up that spill, but is refusing to do that. And so we need to really focus on polluter pay legislation. In terms of PFAS, if I got to be the next state legislator from the 55th, I would want to introduce legislation banning tar sealants. Minnesota has already done that, and I would hope to follow in suit. I also feel like we need to work with EGLE to really expand testing, again, especially in our communities that are the most polluted, which also happen to be Black and brown communities. The one that's key here in our state is 48217, and we need to really focus on the environmental injustice happening in those places as well.
Thank you, Ms. Brabac. And now Mr. Courant of the 55th District, the same question to you, sir.
Yeah, thanks. I think it's really important that as a state, we realize that the natural resources are the resources of the state and the people of the state. And as such, we can't stand for companies coming in and denigrating those and polluting our systems, taking the profits and then leaving, or getting sold off to another company to do it somewhere else. They definitely need to pay for the environmental destruction that they cause. I don't think there's too many people who live in those places that would disagree with that. You're gonna lose a job is usually the response that people would give when they're fighting against enforcing these environmental laws. But most of the time when these disasters happen, a lot of the companies have already left that place, and remediation is one of those things that can be done, has to be done, can create jobs, is a necessity for the state as a whole. And I think like I said before, I think we need to start treating natural resources for what they are, which is something that we can't get back, and it's something that the entire state owns.
Thank you, Mr. Courant. And Mr. Marquis of the 52nd District, same question to you, sir.
Yeah, thanks. So as an environmental professional, this is something that I work with and deal with every day, is environmental regulation. And I think one of the starting points needs to be looking at the regulations and rewriting them so that they make sense. I'll give you a very quick, for instance, if a person has an acutely toxic hazardous waste and they take another acutely toxic hazardous waste and they mix those two hazardous wastes, the law says that's not a hazardous waste anymore. That doesn't make any sense. Things like that are rife throughout the regulations. Secondly, we need to look at proper enforcement of the regulations. The situation that comes most to mind is the green ooze onto 696. I think that was in Madison Heights. That was a situation that both the EPA and the DEQ were aware of. This guy had open vats of hazardous waste in soil pits in his basement. And even after they put him out of business and he was on his way to jail, nothing had been done to remove that substance from those pits. And then we have green ooze out on the freeway. So we need to make sure that we enforce the environmental laws that are out there and take care of the cleanups when we need to take care of them. You know, millions of dollars are spent on proper environmental management every day in our state, but we need to make sure that our energies are properly directed. I'm hoping that we can do something to address the Gelman plume before it reaches the Huron River. Read an article not too long ago saying that that plume is quickly approaching the Huron River, and Ann Arbor does get a substantial amount of its drinking water from the Huron River. So hopefully we can do something before that becomes contaminated as well.
Thank you, Mr. Marquis, and you get the first of the next question. Michigan's K through 12 school systems have had undesirable levels of student performance in recent years. Given the COVID pandemic and a projected $3.2 billion state budget deficit, what strategies do you support for the maintenance of the quality of K through 12 and post-secondary education in Michigan?
Well, we live in a community that is largely supported by the educational industry, if you will. We have several major universities in our community. It is distressing that K through 12 is suffering declining scores, yet we've continued to fund it well, I think. We need to perhaps look at curriculum. I know that as a parent, I've struggled helping my daughter with Common Core math. She's doing math homework and I'm going, that's not the way I was taught to do it. Now, maybe the way I was taught to do it wasn't ideal, but I see my daughter struggling with the way she's being taught math, the way she's being taught science. And I think that we may need to take another look at how the curricula are constructed, because it's clear that we're falling behind.
Thank you, Mr. Marquis. Ms. Brabac of the 55th District, same question to you, ma'am.
Thanks so much, Jeff. So coming from a family of educators, this is something that's really near and dear to my heart. And I have such an appreciation for the time, energy, work that teachers and school personnel put into our future, which are our kids. There are disparities that exist, not only throughout our county, but throughout our state. Right here in Washtenaw County, we know that students on the east side of the county have test scores that are 30 to 40 points less than their counterparts on the west side. And it's not because those kids are smarter. So there are things that we need to do about that. I got to talk with a mom of a student who, and this kid, the student was in 3rd grade. And by October, he had had 3 different teachers for the school year. So there's no continuity for that classroom of students. And that leads to disparities in testing and other things, other markers that the state chooses to look at. So I believe that we need to uncomplicate our education funding. Right now it's terribly complicated. We need to make it much clearer, make those streams of revenue clear in terms of what they are for. I think we also need to invest more in it. Now, one of the ways that I think we could do that is by having a progressive income tax, which could generate between, depending on where you set the level, between $900 million and $1.3 billion. And we know that we're going to need that because we're going to have a huge budget shortfall. So that's one of the things that I think that we could do. I also think we really need to focus on teacher attraction and retention. We know that a couple of weeks ago, the Detroit Public Schools decided to give teachers starting salary at $51,000, which helps with that attraction, retention, and stability for our students. So I also feel like we need to invest in technical and career educational partnerships with our community colleges. And we need to work with our teacher unions to ensure that our teachers are getting what they need to be able to serve our students. The other thing that we need to work on is broadband access for our students in our rural areas. Again, we need to focus on our students and doing what we need to do for them.
Thank you, Ms. Brabac. And the same question to you, Mr. Courant of the 55th District.
Thank you. Yeah, I believe a lot of good points were made both by Greg and Felicia, actually, and we need to work on how the curriculum is taught. I think Ann Arbor is a great example that you can have different forms of teaching. There's alternative high schools and things of that nature where the children excel. and they've really shown to be able to learn in different ways. And there's a lot of good research out there that shows how people learn differently, whether it be having the same teacher from 1st to 8th grade, or being able to choose projects that you might want to make on your own with the help of a teacher that's approved, different frameworks that we can work in that help different students. I think that's something that needs to be adopted more widely. And I believe we can attract teachers into those positions from other positions. They don't need to have gone to school necessarily to be a teacher for their first career, as it might be. There's a great program out there that helps people with other undergraduate degrees become teachers, and you don't have to pay it back until you actually become a teacher and are a teacher for a year and have your internship done. And I don't think a lot of people know about that. There's a lot of people that would love to be educators and they just don't know that there's a pathway. And I think that needs to be made more apparent. And I believe that, moving on to secondary education, I don't think a lot of people know that a trade school is an option, or working in an apprenticeship for a union is an option. And I think that should be made more apparent to them in high school instead of just getting bombarded with a bunch of college ads while you're going to school.
Thank you, sir. And now we're ready for our closing statements. Our first closing statement will be from Ms. Brabac.
Thanks, Jeff. Well, thank you again to the League of Women Voters. Thank you, Sue and Jeff and Emma, for helping us navigate this forum today. And thank you to Stephen and Greg. It was nice to meet you as well. As a Washington County Commissioner, I've gotten to work on a lot of issues, whether that's increasing access to mental health care, environmental issues, infrastructure issues, working on a large deficit. But the thing that I was most proud of is spearheading our county's first ever racial equity policy, which really set up the framework to look at inequities that exist throughout our county. I'm running to be the next state representative in the 55th for two main reasons. One, we need mental health care practitioners in the state legislature. Like I said, we have none right now. Every day I get to hear from residents, from friends, from clients about how the decisions that the legislature is making impacts them in a very real way. So I'm hoping to be able to bring that knowledge to policymaking in Lansing. The second reason is to continue that equity work. The work that I've done has been noticed by the Michigan Department of Civil Rights. And now I'm on a statewide council where we're working to improve and address inequities throughout our state. So I hope to continue to elevate that work. So all the different perspectives that I bring as a policymaker, a mom, a small business owner, an active community member, a psychologist, I hope to be able to bring to bear for our residents here in the 55th in policymaking. Please visit my website. It's FeliciaBrabac.com. Thank you again for having us this evening. And I ask for your vote in the August 4th primary.
Thank you, Ms. Brabac. Now, Mr. Courant, may we have your closing statement?
Thank you. Yeah, I'd like to thank the league as well, as well as Felicia and Greg. It's great to have a forum like this where you can answer questions directly from the constituents. I think this is definitely a service to the community, and I'm happy to see it continue, maybe in a different format this year, but definitely see it continue is something great. I just want to emphasize a few of the points that we made here today, and that we need to recognize the importance of accessible and affordable healthcare, a worthwhile education, access to job opportunities, and the need to protect the environment for the future. And I'm honored to run for this position, and I will be proud to represent the people of the 55th District. And if you'd like to learn more, you can visit me at currentformichigan.com. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Courant. And now, Mr. Marquis of the 52nd District, may we have your closing statement?
Absolutely. Thank you again for having me tonight. I appreciate the opportunity to reach out to voters in the 52nd District. And as we move forward in these challenging times, I think that we need to work together as a society. We have seen increasing partisanship at all levels of government. And this partisan bickering isn't going to solve any of our problems. In recent weeks, we've seen the specter of racism and police brutality raise their ugly heads again. Racism has no place in our society. We need to learn to understand and respect each other. We need to learn how each of us sees the world in different ways and learn how to find common ground. We need to do a better job of reducing violence in our communities, especially with respect to domestic violence. Too many people are trapped in abusive relationships. And right now, victims of abusers use children and finances as leverage against their victims. As we struggle to recover from COVID-19, we need to understand that we need a regulatory and tax structure that's going to allow business, large and small, to thrive in our state. I know we can put people back to work and once again become the great state of Michigan. And I'd like to thank you for your time, and God bless.
Thank you, Mr. Marquis, and thank you all the candidates for your participation this evening. It was wonderful. I'll now turn this back over to Sue for our closing comments.
The League thanks the candidates for participating in tonight's forum, as well as the community members who contributed the questions. Our candidate forums will be available for streaming on your computer or smartphone. Go to our website, lwvanarbor.org, and look for the link to the programs. In addition, the forums can be viewed on CTN, the Community Television Network. Please urge your friends and neighbors to watch these forums as well. For additional nonpartisan information on candidates and ballot issues, go to vote411.org. That's vote411.org. The League's voter resource guide covering local, state, and national candidates, as well as current proposals that will appear on your ballot. With the passage of Proposal 3 in 2018, all voters are now eligible for an absentee ballot. In addition, while voters are encouraged to register ahead of time, Michigan law now provides for same-day voter registration, although you have to go in person to your clerk's office to register. So just remember, no matter how you do it, make sure you vote in the August 4th primary election. Good night.